In this video, Dr. Jordan Peterson explains what self-actualization actually is.
Now, you might imagine that you could concentrate on the mismatch between organismic responses and the environment. That's what behavior therapists really do. They say, well, how are you acting? And what are the consequences? But that isn't really where Rogers goes. Rogers is more psychoanalytic than the behavior therapists. And what he seems to be primarily concerned is whether or not your self-representation is an accurate representation of how your organism is responding. In some sense, for Rogers, the organism takes the place of God. It's more or less omniscient. So your organism is going to tell you the truth in every situation. And it's up to you whether or not you're going to pay attention to that and make sense of it, or whether you're going to engage in any of the different kinds of shenanigans that you might engage in to stop yourself from going through the complex process of symbolization. Because you might say, well, you're back in the bar, and you might say, well, you notice the anxiety, and then, different ways of symbolizing it come to mind. These people are all just jerks. And then another thing comes to mind is, well, maybe nobody likes me. And then maybe another idea that's associated with symbolization comes to mind, which is, well, maybe there's elements of my social behavior that I should adjust. And I presume that if Rogers was having a conversation with one of his clients, he would assume that was the most fruitful potential step towards accurate symbolization. Now, Rogers felt that anxiety emerged when the self-concept was not accurately symbolically representing the organism's experiences. And so that would be, in some sense, if you're a house divided within yourself, then you're pathological from a Rogerian perspective. And you can think about that, in some sense, as a move away from necessary simplicity. I mean, if your self-concept is set up properly, it doesn't contain contradictory and misleading bits of information. Everything works seamlessly together. And so what that would mean is that you think about something, you act it out, and it works. And then that's an indication that the organization between, say, these three different levels of being is, well, the right word is isomorphic. Each represents the other with sufficient accuracy. And so that means that you're congruent. And if you're congruent, then the world is treating you not only in the manner that you want to be treated, but also in the manner that's most likely to further your actions in the world as an organism. And so that's partly why Rogers believed that the organism had wisdom. It's because its natural proclivity was to operate in the world effectively and to expand its competence at the same time. Now, a self-actualized person, because that's one of Rogers' phrases, is someone whose self-concept accurately represents their organismic being. Now, Rogers was primarily a clinician as well. And his theories were derived from his clinical experience. And his theories informed his clinical practice. And Rogers invented or developed what he believed to be a new kind of therapy. And he called that client-centered therapy. Now, you've probably heard about student-centered education. I mean, Rogers' ideas have had a tremendous amount of influence, certainly not least in educational psychology, also in conflict reduction of various sorts. You start with Rogers' initial assumptions, which is, first of all, that you should regard your experience as real. Second, that your organism will give you accurate information about the totality of experience. And third, that your self-concept should accurately encompass your actual experience. There are implications of that theory for therapy. And one of the implications is that you can figure out what you should do if you want to. Because your organism will tell you, or at least hint at you, about which directions are correct and which directions aren't. And if you follow those, then you're going to naturally gravitate towards a state of being where you're more and more accurately represented by yourself, but also that your representation and your organism are going to act more effectively in the world. They're not bumping up against each other all the time. And, you know, they're not in conflict anymore. And so that's the goal of the self-actualized person. And therapy, in part, is the art of furthering that process of self-actualization.